So hello, everybody. My name is Lily Kunslana, and I will be serving as your moderator for today. I also serve as one of the representatives to the UN for the Baha'i International Community, and it's a pleasure to see you all here today. So again, welcome to the side event, official side event of HLPF, tracking progress and mobilizing regional strategies to advance the SDGs after the Pact for the Future. This event is organized by the Coalition for the UN We Need and co-sponsored by the Baha'i International Community and the Permanent Mission of Jamaica. So wonderful to have the support of the mission. So today's discussion will highlight the essential role of civil society in advancing and monitoring the implementation of the Pact for the Future and the UN80 Initiative, with particular attention to HLPF 2025 priority SDGs that are under review this year. We will also spotlight regional strategies that foster peer learning and practical ways to align Pact commitments with SDG progress. The session will introduce new tools, the Pact Monitoring Survey Interim Report, the C4UN Annual Pact Report, the Pact Implementation Dashboard, and the UN80 Monitoring Framework. These tools support accountability and informed decision-making. This is a key opportunity to strengthen collaboration and ensure that civil society voices shape UN reform efforts, grounded in people's priorities and multilateral values. So in today's session, we'll have today's event will be composed of two sessions. One on monitoring the Pact for the Future and the UN80 Initiative, and the other session will focus on cross-regional perspectives. And in between each session, we will have 5 minutes to have a bit of a discussion and ask some questions as well. So without further ado, I will now open the floor to our opening speaker. Our opening speaker is going to be Ms. Aika Waters, counselor at the Permanent Mission of Jamaica. I would like to thank you, Ms. Waters, for joining this discussion on behalf of the Jamaica Mission. We really appreciate Jamaica's leadership on the SDGs and the Pact for the Future. I think most of us, I think we can all agree that it's also been really important that member states like Jamaica have championed the inclusive nature of multilateralism. We need to be inclusive of all, particularly in the follow-up to the Pact for the Future. So thank you again for accepting the invitation and for offering remarks to frame the conversation today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. The Excellencies, colleagues, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to join you for this discussion on tracking progress and mobilizing regional strategies to advance the SDGs after the Summit of the Future. I want to start by extending thanks to the C4UN team for organizing this timely event and to the Baha'i International Community for hosting us today. As we convene in the margins of this year's high-level political forum, having only 5 years remaining for the 2030 deadline, and with only 17% of SDG targets being on track, accelerating progress across all the SDGs has never been more crucial. This year's HLPF discussions place specific focus on SDG 3 related to good health and well-being, SDG 5 on gender equality, SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, SDG 14 on life below water, and SDG 17 on partnerships for the goals. In our effort to significantly move the needle on the attainment of these goals, it is important to assess progress made to date, identify persistent gaps and challenges, develop the right tools, and create the necessary pathways to address these gaps. Jamaica remains a steadfast supporter of and advocate for the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals, not least because of its close alignment with our own National Development Plan, Vision 2030 Jamaica, which is over 90% aligned with SDG. This natural yet deliberate ownership ensures that progress is mutually reinforcing between national objectives and the SDGs and serves as a useful example for embedding the SDGs at the national level. Since the convening of the last HLPF, member states have reaffirmed their commitment to advancing the SDGs and have demonstrated a willingness to improve systems that are integral to their attainment. Notable progress was seen in the Compromiso de Sevilla, the outcome of the Fourth International Conference on Financing for Development. However, we remain steadfast in our advocacy for greater global action with respect to financing of the SDG. Jamaica will continue to optimize our co-chairmanship of the SDG Stimulus Leaders Group and the Group of Friends on SDG Financing to support the call for reform of the international financial architecture and to enhance existing financial mechanisms for the adequate funding of the SDG. The Pact for the Future, adopted last September during the Summit of the Future, represents a renewed and accelerated commitment to advancing the SDGs, strengthening multilateralism and transforming global governance. Member states acknowledged then that by taking specific actions to drive SDG implementation at the local, national, regional, and international levels, a more sustainable future could be secured for current and future generations. By committing to undertake the 56 actions of the Pact, using a whole of government and a whole of society approach, member states recognize that significant progress could be made across all the SDGs. As we fast approach the anniversary of the adoption of the Pact, however, we see very clearly that work still lies ahead in translating these commitments into action. Jamaica, having co-facilitated the Declaration on Future Generations, one of the two annexes to the Pact, alongside the Kingdom of the Netherlands, feels a sense of responsibility in ensuring and advocating for its implementation. In the DFG, governments agreed to embed futures thinking into their policymaking by making decisions now that take into account the needs and interests of those who will inherit the earth after us. They committed to leveraging science, data, statistics, and strategic foresight to ensure long-term thinking and planning, and to develop and implement sustainable practices and the institutional reforms necessary to ensure evidence-based decision-making. We've been engaging with like-minded member states, civil society groups, and academia to share best practices on DFG implementation, and will continue to explore practical ways in which to embed the principles of the DFG across the various levels and sectors of governance. As we recall the commitments made in the Pact and its annexes, it is therefore incumbent on us to see through these commitments and to take action now that entrenches the relevant tools across all sectors. Colleagues, we find ourselves today in a particularly challenging environment as the UN undertakes its most comprehensive reform to date through the UN80 Initiative. The UN reform process, though not without its uncertainties, presents us with an opportunity to reevaluate the effective and efficient functioning of the organization and to reaffirm our commitment to multilateralism by creating a UN that is more fit for purpose and able to meet the needs of generations to come. We must center this process around the core values of UN and ensure that the principles of intergenerational fairness and justice are at the heart of our considerations. Just last Friday, Jamaica co-hosted alongside Kenya and the Netherlands a dialogue event with the School of International Futures on the DFG and the UN80 Initiative. We explored ways in which UN reform should embed a futures lens in its deliberations, one which makes use of data, science, and foresight. We intend to continue having these sorts of discussions as the reform process moves forward and find it particularly relevant as member states consider the future UN that they wish to see. In the midst of these uncertainties, and as we look to the future in the attainment of the SDGs, mobilizing strategies for advancing implementation are paramount importance. Discussions such as this, which bring together civil society and other partners, help us to explore useful solutions to fill the gaps in SDG implementation. sharing best practices on regional strategies to advance the SDGs offers a practical way to understand common challenges and identify solutions inter and cross-regionally. In galvanizing broad support to accelerate SDG implementation, including through enhanced regional coherence, we can unlock greater progress on SDG implementation and enhance partnerships. Today's discussion will explore some of the ways in which regional partners have already embedded the SDGs and the Pact for the Future in their policies and frameworks. It will facilitate a better understanding of how these initiatives can be applied in other contexts. In closing, I wish to highlight that the engagement and involvement of civil society in SDG and Pact implementation is very important. Your valuable insights and inputs served as a useful basis upon which these documents were negotiated. And in the same vein, your ownership, advocacy, and implementation post-adoption are integral for their realization. Through your efforts with local communities and other stakeholders, and in partnership with governments, we can begin to see accelerated progress across the board. We're particularly pleased to see the efforts being made to track Pact implementation progress and to develop accountability measures for all stakeholders. We hope that these tools will be useful for the various practitioners across the scope of Pact implementation. We welcome this opportunity to showcase practical ways to not only keep a finger on the pulse of SDG and the Pact implementation, but also share useful experiences and begin to think critically about how we can advance our common goals. Now is the time to accelerate our commitments and to create a path towards meaningful progress. I very much look forward to the interesting discussions and thank you again for having us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Waters, for framing the discussion that we're about to have today and for the support for civil society engagement in this whole process. So we will now move into the first panel discussion on monitoring the Pact for the Future in the UN80 Initiative. This session introduces 3 key tools that were described before, developed by the UN Information Clearinghouse that aim to strengthen transparency, monitoring, and stakeholder accountability in the Pact and UN80 follow-up. The Pact contains 56 actions and 361 sub-actions, and effective tracking of these is therefore very much essential. So I'll just describe the tools very briefly before I hand it over to our presenters who will give more in-depth information that was found through the use of the tools. So first is the Pact Monitoring Survey. The findings from the first round of the stakeholder mapping survey conducted as part of, this contains information that was conducted part of the C4UN efforts to support the follow-up processes of the Pact for the Future and its annexes. The second tool, the implementation dashboard, tracks commitments made in the Pact, their implementation, and the associated action items. And then the third tool, the UN80 Monitoring Framework, describes the work streams of UN80, the associated experts, and seeks to map how member states are interacting with various aspects of the initiative. So without further ado, I will hand it over to our first presenter, who is joining us online, Eliane El Haber, who works on for UN on the Pact Monitoring Survey. Over to you, Eliane.
Thank you so much, Lily. Can you confirm hearing me clearly first?
Yes, you're very audible.
Okay, amazing. I'm just gonna wait for a few seconds to have the slides on the screen. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the event and the food. I saw you. Regarding the Pact for the Future Interim Monitoring Report and the survey, starting with a little bit of introduction of what is the survey and what are we targeting in here. We can go to the next slide, please. And I'm gonna go after the introduction about the methodology that we conducted the survey with, and then the report is divided into thematic engagement, so following the chapters or based on the chapters of the Pact, and then the key recommendations that came from the stakeholders who filled out the survey and some next steps. So a little bit of introduction. This survey was launched by C4UN and the Information Clearinghouse team right after, not right, like a few months ago, which is a response after the Pact for the Future adoption, for us to try and monitor and see somehow who's doing what. What I mean by monitor, I mean by trying to track among civil society and other stakeholders who was able to take some actions moving forward, those who are involved in the implementation of the Pact for the Future, but also those who are monitoring the implementation of the Pact for the Future. And I think it's important to mention here that it was not only targeting, the survey was not and is not, because it's still open, not only targeting civil society actors. Of course, this is one of the main target audience, but also others, any other stakeholders who are doing some work in this sense. So the main four objectives of the survey and the report is, again, like identifying the actors who are involved and trying to understand what are the thematic priorities and what are what is the geographic scope and which regions are maybe more involved than the others, and of course collecting recommendations from these actors who filled out the survey on how do they think that the Pact for the Future can be better implemented in their own context. And last objective is somehow creating promoting transparency and networking and maybe collaboration between those who filled out the survey and shared with us information about the work that they are doing. So we can go to the next slide. In terms of methodology, so we launched this survey on the 1st of April, and it's still open because this is an ongoing process that we're gonna still like always be analyzing and reporting. So we started on the 1st of April, and we collected responses until the 22nd of May, which are included in this report that we are launching today. But then again, the responses are still welcome from anyone. And the way we disseminated the survey is through the social media platforms of C4UN, but also by targeted emails to organizations that we know that they are doing some work, just to be able to collect more information, some information as much as possible. We can say that we have a diversity. We have 62 responses. We have responses from all the 5 regions. But we do not have, we cannot say that they are equal, because that's not the case. We have more responses from some region, for example, Africa and Asia, less responses from the MENA regions, but we have everyone covered. And again, as I said, it was not necessarily only targeting civil society organizations, but targeting anyone who wanted to fill out that survey. And in the responses, we have responses from civil society organizations, youth-led networks or groups, academia, UN entities, private sectors, and so on, research institutes, and so on. So now I'm gonna walk you chapter by chapter very quickly through what is the result of our analysis. We can go to chapter 1. And in chapter 1, this is a chapter that we had the highest responses. So in chapter 1, we have so many of those who filled out the survey from civil society and others that are particularly involved in financing and governance reform and peace building and human rights. And there's a strong advocacy, education, and policy work. Now, we also saw in the analysis that there is a strong focus on gender equality, climate justice, and equitable financing. And here you can see on the screen some examples of some of the countries that we collected information from. But there are so many countries involved and so many global South actors. And the general feel is that the Pact for the Future, for what it is strong and it's welcome. But again, there are these calls from civil society and other actors for strong support and bolder action and better monitoring to be able to move forward with the implementation. That's on chapter 1. Chapter 2, we can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So on chapter 2, there is an active civil society engagement, but it's like it was mixed between those who are actively supporting implementation and others who are working on monitoring rules, because this information was asked in the survey, so we were able to identify who's working on monitoring and who is not. Key focuses, as you can see, are related to disarmament, advocacy for strong disarmament and conflict resolution, and there was an advocacy for strong civil society participation in UN peace processes. Again, like the general feel out of the survey is that there is this welcome to the pact, and but again, asking and advocating and recommending greater support and faster implementation, reaffirming civil society and other actors are reaffirming their role in this entire process. Chapter 3, we didn't have much response, but we still have our responses from that chapter. So when we hear like chapter 3 is the chapter and the annex on global digital compact. So the thing is that what was interesting is that we didn't have many responses, but they were also diversified from civil society actors, from academic or from academia representatives, and from the private sector. And we see that there is a focus on inclusive ethical access to technology and bridging digital divides. And there's also an interest, like there is one organization that mentioned their strong work in rural communities, and that's also an interesting aspect through media and digital training. Another one in Sao Paulo, which is the University of Sao Paulo, on integrating indigenous knowledge in research and sustainability. And I guess the mention of rural communities and the indigenous communities is important in this aspect. Then we can go to chapter 4. And in chapter 4, again, of course, chapter 4 and the annex to the chapter 4 and the Declaration on Future Generations, we had a significant number of responses of youth network and community organization and research institutes that are working on this chapter and the DFG, on youth empowerment, on education, and on long-term sustainability. We have some examples that are diversified from Global South and Global North. So here you can see an example of like Bangladesh, and another one in Switzerland. But again, we had some sort of balance in terms of the regional balance. Again, like the pact was welcomed for sure, but civil society and other actors are again urging stronger institutional support through funding, through formal youth participation platforms to ensure that the Pact's long-term success and accountability to future generations. Then we can go to chapter 5, the last chapter. We have a strong civil society engagement in this chapter. This was one of the chapters that got a significant number of responses, focusing on multilateral reform, on democratic accountability, on financial architecture, and inclusion of local actors. Here also we had some mix between those who are focused on monitoring and those who are contributing to the implementation through advocacy, through capacity building, and through awareness efforts. And we see again this call for faster action, for transparency, for political will, and future-oriented multilateral system. So this is a little bit about all the 5 chapters. So mainly we were able to know how are people working in there. Then here we have the section for the key recommendations. So we have if you check the report, and then I'll give you the QR code so you can take a look at it, you're gonna see a bunch of recommendations that are divided into, cross-cutting issues and thematic areas and all of that. But here we collected some of the recommendations that we find that are maybe better articulated than others and more specific than others. We can go to the first slide of the recommendations. Okay, the previous one. No, the previous one, please. Okay. Yes, thank you so much. So the first one is on inclusive, participatory, and intersectional implementations. So the responses we received that from the general field from everyone We have the push for the importance of including marginalized groups, of including civil society, of including young people in the implementation, and specifically through platforms at the local, regional, national levels, and platforms that are established in a formal way. Capacity building and funding. The importance of, I mean, it's self-explanatory. So it's the importance of funding for grassroots and global South organizations, so they can be able to move forward with the implementation. Institutional reforms, yes, it was almost everywhere in the survey where the respondents were pushing for, or like asking for reforms, including at the level of the UN system. Human rights and gender, which were already cross-cutting issues in the Pact and the chapters, were also highlighted as aspects to move forward with when implementing. Monitoring, transparency, and accountability. There is nothing really to explain about this. Co-leadership and partnerships. So again, the importance of having this efforts led by multi-stakeholder partnerships to be able to move forward. There was a mention of digital and technological inclusions. The next slide, peace operations and consultation. The private sector accountability, and this is an important aspect in terms of like what is the private sector contributing to, human rights and environmental abuses, and trying to push for the private sector to be more following the UN guiding principles on business and human rights and other obligations. The mention of future generations and recommendation on the future generations, and developing narrative and indicators that move beyond GDP to center long-term and well-being and sustainability, reframing multilateralism and sustained communication and outreach, and the importance of having a communication that is more contextualized to simplify the Pact for the Future to be able to become like a tool that people can use on the local level in their own language and in the way that they see that this can be implemented. So this is a little bit of the recommendations, but of course you can see everything in the report itself. I can go to the next page. Yes. So here on the screen, you can see the QR code where you can access the report. So it's around 30 pages. You can access it there. You can see the organizations who contributed to it, those who gave us the consent to be included, and you can also see the survey in the report itself. So if you haven't filled it out yet, you can also fill it out. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's an ongoing process, and we will keep collecting responses and analyzing on the go. So feel free to add anything if you are working on the Pact in a way or another. And if you have any questions you would like to ask, I'm also leaving the email for you on the screen. And I guess that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eliane, for that comprehensive report, and for sharing with us the key highlights, and also to know that the survey is still open so people can go in and fill out if they would like. So our next speaker was in very high demand, so he's not able to join us in person, but he has sent a video, and hopefully he will join us later on after his speaking engagement with UN Women. So we have a video from Ishan Shah, who is the C4 UN Information Clearinghouse Research Analyst. So we'll hear from Ishan next. And Ishan is going to be speaking to us about the implementation dashboard at UN80 Monitoring Framework.
Good afternoon, colleagues. It's great to be here with you all. Apologies, I can't join you in person just yet, but I should be at the event towards the end. So I hope to catch some of you in person when I arrive shortly. But it's a great pleasure to be here with you all today, this afternoon at this side event. My name is Ishan Shah. I am the lead analyst for Pact for the Future Follow-Up with the Coalition for the UN We Need. And today it's my absolute delight to present two of the dashboards that the Information Clearinghouse team has been working diligently on. Firstly is this Pact for the Future implementation follow-up dashboard, which has been brought to you by the Information Clearinghouse team. It's something that we've been working on since the Summer of the Future processes around the negotiations of the Pact for the Future and its annexes, and something that we're pleased to present more formally today as a tool for everyone here to use, really in any way that you feel most comfortable and most useful to your advocacy, whether that's the international, regional, and national levels. And really this Pact dashboard is looking at centralizing all of the items to do with the Pact for the Future and its annexes into one place, into one sort of hub and home, which we as civil society can use and leverage. You will see a little bit of a description as to what the Pact dashboard is. It defines responsible and identifies responsible UN entities, civil society partners, and member state champions. Really, this is a tool to showcase what the Pact is, how it's broken down into its 5 chapters and annexes, what are the processes that are being taken forward in terms of requests to the Secretary General, as well as key action items, and also a tool that we can use as civil society to identify partners, identify collaborations, and ways in which we can work together to really translate the Pact into concrete actions in our advocacy on the road to the 2028 review of the Pact for the Future itself. And really linked to this is the interim report that has been produced and presented today by Eliane, which has also been created by the C4UN and ICH teams. That report really looks at the survey data that we've gathered around what civil society are doing to really further and advance the Pact for the Future. And we really look forward to presenting that today and for you all to read it. This will also link as well to the annual Pact report that the C4UN team will be producing every year. It will look at what's been happening around the Pact for the Future, what has been the highlights and the key movements. But more importantly, it will look at what is the role of civil society, what has been the role of civil society, and how is civil society really demonstrating leadership and implementing the Pact for the Future and its annexes, broken down by chapter, and sort of really inspiring that action, and sort of showcasing to member states as well that civil society are leading on implementing the Pact for the Future, but also have been before there was a Pact 2. So it shows that continuity, it shows the link and the value of the Pact for the Future, and how we can really leverage it as a tool within our advocacy to accelerate the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the second dashboard that I'm really delighted to present today is the UN80 Initiative monitoring dashboard. And this, I think many of us are familiar with UN80 and UN80 Initiative, and really welcome the briefings by the Secretary General he has given to the membership of the UN on UN80. But really this dashboard, again, is another centralized space for us as civil society to really come and look at what's happening with UN80, historically what's been happening, what are the sort of key pieces of information that we need to be aware of, news articles. It's got a tab of resources here, which has all of the briefings that the Secretary General has run. It's got some articles. It's got the UN news piece. It's got the mandate registry, which was launched on the 24th of June at the latest gathering of UN80. We have articles, we have key experts. So if you're looking to speak to someone who is well-versed in UN80, then we have that identified. And we also have a brief mapping of member state positions based on their statements that are being delivered in these interactive and informal dialogues convened by the Secretary General, just so that we as civil society have an overview of where member states stand, what are their positions, and identifying potential champions that we can work alongside to make sure that civil society can be included within the UN80 discussions as well. So really, these are the 2 dashboards that we are presenting today. We hope that they're a useful tool for you all to use. We welcome your feedback as well. All feedback, anything positive, anything constructive, any criticisms you might have of these 2 dashboards. We really welcome you to engage with them, to use them, to leverage them, to make them your own, essentially. As the ICH team and the C4UN, we stand ready to continue to adapt and evolve these to the suiting needs of civil society, and really look forward to welcoming further engagement. And that's all from me, but hopefully see you in a few minutes when I arrive in a bit. So great to be here with you all, and thanks so much, and looking forward to seeing you all soon.
Wonderful. So if you have questions for Ishan, you can pose them to him when he arrives.
How do we access that spreadsheet?
That is a good question. We'll
Actually, everyone should have received a welcome email, and I included the hyperlinks to all of the information. And I can send it to you.
Yeah, we can also put it in the Zoom chat if that's helpful for people. The link, yeah. Can
Oh,
figure that.
sure.
Yeah. We can arrange that, yeah. So maybe before we go into the discussion, we'll have a respondent react to some of the tools that have been presented so far. So I hand the floor over to Dan Foy, the principal at Global Analytics at Gallup. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for hosting me and giving me an opportunity to respond today. I feel like in some ways I have the best job here because I just got to read the reports and tell people what I think about them. So excited to do that. For those who don't know Gallup, just a little bit of background. We really exist to help provide a specific kind of data that is essential for initiatives like this, and that's the lived experiences and voices of people all over the world. So our flagship initiative in this regard is the Gallup World Poll, which is conducted in 140 countries every year, used as the source for some of the Sustainable Development Goal indicator data, most notably the Findex data that we collect on behalf of the World Bank. Latest release just came out last week. And so as an organization dedicated to measurement, I really want to emphasize a few things that jumped out at me about the work that C4UN has done here and the work that's happening around the Pact. The first is an adage that everyone's heard before, probably: you can't move what you don't measure. So this starting process of identifying what are the commitments, what are the organizations that are involved, it actually is going a step beyond that even, because it's one thing to say we're going to collect data on the kinds of outcomes. It's another thing to say we're going to work together to identify who all the stakeholders are. So if you can't move what you don't measure, well, you also need movers. And those are the CSOs, the grassroots organizations, all of the local youth-led groups, country-level initiatives that are really about bringing the Pact to life and ensuring that the SDGs are attainable. The second takeaway I had looking through the survey results in particular and reflecting on some of these experiences, another cliche, if it is, all politics is local. This is something that we see time and again. We just released some data looking at trust in local institutions, confidence in local service delivery around the globe. And if you look at whether or not people are experiencing basics that they need within their communities, access to clean water, education, healthcare, people's satisfaction with those services is more predictive of their trust in national institutions than any other variables in the data set, more predictive than demographics, more predictive than income variables. We know that at the end of the day, people are responsive to what they experience in their local conditions. And ultimately, the SDGs are about the lived experiences of people. Again, I think this really underscores the importance of identifying, bringing together the kinds of grassroots organizations that are actually making a difference in people's lives, that are bringing these lofty statements that we hear here in New York to life for people all over the world. The last one, this one isn't a cliche yet, hopefully it becomes one, is DEI isn't dead. And this is particularly here in the US, there's been obviously a sea change over the last year around a lot of the initiatives that are focused on things like inclusivity, equity. We hear throughout the process of discussing the SDGs, and we see practical examples of where these are incredibly important for actually achieving the outcomes that matter. I think one of my favorite examples is, again, if we look at financial inclusion, if we look at climate, we know that targeting women in local communities around the world is far more effective and has a better ROI than targeting men. There's lots of data that supports this, that bringing women into the formal sector, providing resources to them, it's not about paying lip service to some ideal, it's about getting the work done. And we know that that matters. I also think that there's positive indicators. This is something I pulled from the news just recently. S&P just reported on a series of shareholder votes across big companies in the US. There are about 24 of these recently, where shareholders have put forward anti-DEI initiatives. In all 24 cases, those were voted down with 98 to 99% of shareholders opposing those initiatives. There may be shifts in the national media landscape, but there is also a wide recognition across society that these kinds of things are important. And I think we hear that echoed in a lot of the comments, particularly from the survey that focuses on the inclusion aspects, focuses on equity and bringing all voices to the table here. A couple of really quickly other topics that stood out. I mentioned gender already. I think this is another really important area for the team to continue to look into, not just on inclusion as it comes to measuring the SDGs, but also the role that gender plays globally in other headline issues that we know are on the horizon. So if we think about gender norms globally, if we think about population, which is a big focus, emerging focus, a lot of countries below replacement levels on population, what's going on with gender norms within societies in order to make this work. I think those are some unanswered questions there. Technology, another big topic that came to the fore in a lot of the comments of the report, and I'll note that part of the UN80 process is also an AI review of thousands of statements and commitments that have been made. I'm really excited to see the results of that come forward. We all know the potential of AI, the potential impact that could have as a disruptor positively or negatively. I also want to make sure that in this conversation, we're not losing sight of some of the global nature around these technological tools. And on the opportunity side, we have examples of countries that have leapfrogged technologies. The classic is landline telephone straight to cell phone. AI could be another positive disruptor in this regard, but I firmly believe that that will only be the case if we see AI tools that are built with local realities in mind. It can't just be translating English or Mandarin AI tools into local languages. There has to be a ground up sort of support around this kind of work. And so encouraging civil society actors and other organizations to continue to invest in that kind of effort. And then the final one I think really jumps out at me is, and this was buried in one of the reports, I forget which one, this notion that collective action also requires collective communication. This idea broadly of collective intelligence and how do we get groups together in order to effectively achieve large-scale change. This is really what the UN exists for, what all of these efforts are aimed at. It's just a reminder that events like this one, taking an opportunity to highlight good work that's happening, the work that C4UN is doing in mapping and identifying all of these initiatives that are underway, it's our responsibility to amplify and shine a light on those kinds of initiatives and make sure that more and more people are hearing about the good work that's happening and are recognizing opportunities for their organizations, their countries to be able to join in these movements as they're coming to life. And I know I'm coming up on my time here. I had a couple other really practical comments I wanted to throw out for the C4UN team, just a little bit of encouragement going forward on this work. First, please continue pushing for more of those global responses. We need MENA in that study. We need to hear those voices represented. And just also making sure that the diversity of the kinds of organizations being included really is paramount as you continue to reach out to more and more of these organizations. The second is looking for opportunities to bring it to life. I think this convening is a great example of one of those sorts of opportunities, but also thinking about how our organizations can work to connect the kinds of grassroots organizations that are out there, helping them learn from one another, helping them plan, helping them identify strategies to be able to really bring their missions to life. And then finally, keeping the lines of communication open. This survey shouldn't be the endpoint in this process. The organizations that have been identified are also in many cases some of the best signals for what's going on in local communities. And so continuing to engage with those organizations, especially as we enter an environment where many large-scale research programs are being scaled back, losing some of the funding that they've had previously in demographic and health surveys, as USAID is a notable example here. But we know this is across the board in many sectors. Making sure that we're relying on the lived experiences and the insight and understanding of the kinds of organizations that are working on the ground on these kinds of issues is only going to be more important over the next few years. Thank you again for your time today, giving me an opportunity to read and respond.
Thank you so much for the Thank you very much. So we'll now open the floor for some comments, or if you have any questions or observations of your own that you would like to share before we go on to our second discussion. So please, over to you now.
Hi, my name is Loida Garcia Vivo. I am the chair of the American Library Association delegation to the UN. And I have a comment for the Dan here, because librarians are always looking up to Gallup and all the data. And we are encountering great deal of situations related to misinformation. And I wonder if you have some light for us in terms of DEI and how misinformation is impacting communities, and then the work that you just described in related to the data collected, and that you're using it to help us NGOs here.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important point. And here's to the librarians, by the way. Thank you for being here. I think there's a lot of interesting work happening in the misinformation space. And we see fact checkers and other organizations that are trying to do things once the information is out there. I personally believe that, at least from the Gallup seat, the most effective thing that we see is trying to go out and get truly representative data. Because oftentimes with misinformation, it's the loudest voices or those that have the biggest microphones that are driving misinformation. And that can be on a global or national stage, or it can be in the Reddit subforum or the small communities, right? It's something that happens at all levels of scale. But going out and figuring out what people's actual experiences are and then really putting in an effort to report that. The truth is the light in this case, and in my belief that helps to shine on this. But it's also just an incredibly challenging topic that we need to continue to work on. So maybe more librarians as well out there in the community helping to bring truth to people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we had another question. Come across.
Ursula Schäfer-Preuß, UN Women, German National Committee. Gender has been mentioned. The data issue is really a challenge. And I wonder how you can collect really the data at the local level, going into communities everywhere. It is difficult. Well, there's a UN Women, New York here, they have the gender snapshot. So I think there are data available, in particular related to the SDG context. But I wonder in your big frame, how you really get the correct level of data together.
Perhaps, I think that's maybe a question that the other panelists can also consider, but maybe, I don't know if we have Eliane online, or I don't know, then if you also want to, and it's a.
Yeah, I don't want to dominate the responses, though I do
Yeah.
have thoughts.
Yeah. I don't, maybe we can see if Eliane, you want to come in before we come back to the room.
Yes, I mean, like I can say that we're trying as much as possible to target as many grassroots and local civil society organizations and other stakeholders, so we can through that have as much as responses from the local context. And like my response is that just trying to reach as many of these organizations to have more information about the local context, but that's all I can say.
Thank you so much, Eliane.
One thing I would add is I think an inclusive mindset is important in research design as well. And so when we, I think every issue is a gender issue, right? There's not like a separate class of issues that are only about one gender or the other, in my opinion. But at the same time, we know things like I've been meeting with organizations recently who want to have better statistics on gender-based violence globally. Incredibly difficult thing to be able to speak to be able to interview people about, thinking through how do you bring experts in to make sure you're getting the right kind of information, that you're doing it in a way that is safe, that is respectful of the people who you're gathering that information from, I think is really critical. And I'd love to talk more about some of the ways that we really try to make sure that we're representing all voices when we do these kinds of studies.
Do we have any other questions? Please, over to you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think that's very, very important, and the discussions that we have about data. When we're talking about just tapping on your example of domestic violence, when you're talking about domestic violence and we want to collect survey data, it is difficult, but allow those victims or who are affected by it to talk about it could be an easier way to capture the data. But when they talk about it, it will be a storytelling, it will be a narrative. But SDG by nature indicator themselves is actually statistical. So how is it that we'll be able to tap on these narratives, the qualitative nature of this storytelling, to be able to measure it in the SDG context? So how do we, marry those two? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Su. Perhaps we can take one or two more questions if there were others.
Good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon, friends. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm from Malaysia with Dr. Su, with the Malaysian CSO SDG Alliance, and also Baha'i delegation, BIC. I wanted to just share a little bit. We were just talking in the previous session about citizen-generated data. And we were also sharing that in Malaysia, the CSO, SDG Alliance, has been able to make some progress in connecting with the National Statistical Office. And one thing that we realized, because we also ran a survey among our 200 organizations in the Alliance, and found that capacity building was required. Right? So I think that is because many of them collect data, or they say they collect data, or they don't publish the data. And so the data can't be used. And if you can't use it, then it lacks that value. Whereas it could be really very important, especially to capture grassroots lived realities. And so we connected with the National Statistical Office, and they've agreed to come and do capacity building. And they were interested in also using that data in their analysis. So we've just got inroads now. We're having meeting the chief statistician in the country to also see how we can move forward and collaborate on it. So yeah, some baby steps.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. And I'm trying to remind myself that we also want to have more of a discussion perhaps rather than a rapid fire questions of the panelists. And just to keep on time, perhaps we can move into the next session and we can keep some of the comments from this session into the next, and we can continue the conversation with the panelists in the next session as well, because I want to be respectful of your time. So we'll move on to our next discussion, which is on cross-regional perspectives. So just to highlight that, and I think as you can see from the survey results, it's really important that we have regional insights on the Pact as well as SDG implementation. And we have to be able to highlight what the innovations are, as some of the comments have shown, where we see obstacles and opportunities for collaboration. So really regional cooperation can be a bridge between global ambition and national implementation. And just as a reminder, as we're about to hear from the different guests who are here to talk about implementation from a regional perspective, a quick reminder that the Coalition for the UN We Need will host a regional futures forum this fall. So they will be convening civil society and governments to shape regional strategies and feed into the Global Futures Forum, which will take place in 2026 as a step towards the 2028 Pact Review Leader Summit. So you can see all these stepping stones that are being created for us to continue to this conversation with one another. So with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Florence Sievu, who's the Executive Director of the SDGs Kenya Forum. So over to you, Florence.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's a great pleasure, and I want to agree with you, Leanne, in terms of the importance of regional voices, national voices in this conversation. I already am smiling because I heard a lot about Malaysia and other countries and things that resonate on gender equality, gender data, and so forth. So speaking about Africa, of course, it's been 10 years of implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Africa faces significant challenges. These include issues of climate change, inadequate financing, weak institutional capacity, and the list is very long. And I know a lot of you who come from the global south maybe resonate with some of these challenges that are still ongoing. We look at the framework, the SDG framework, as a very ambitious framework. When we came together in 2015, we felt that there's going to be hope for many of us in the African continent, for example. 10 years later, a lot of questions now, and that's why we are welcoming, of course, today's conversation by C4UN, tracking progress, mobilizing regional strategies, and how do we ensure that we are moving jointly within this process. And of course, last year, we've been a host in Kenya for the UN Civil Society Conference, and a lot of the conversations, the Pact of the Future, welcoming the UN80 Initiative is very, very critical for us. And so as we move on with this conversation, of course, from Africa, we, of course, are welcoming a lot of this, the peer-to-peer exchange conversations, because again, this richness in terms of understanding what other continents or what other countries are doing and how you can get involved and how you can shape your own narrative and of course share some of the things that you are engaging in. And so I'll start by saying, of course, the first input in terms of innovation within the regional strategies and partnership for SDG implementation in terms of advancing the summit for the future is first, how do we continuously ensure that regional cooperation is continuous within the regional platforms? For example, in Africa, we have the African Union, we have UNECA and many others. And so for a long time, many countries, of course, are engaging within the national level, but sometimes linking that to the regional platforms sometimes becomes a bit difficult. So then how do we ensure that this continued, just delivering for public good, there's an ecosystem of protection, of ensuring that whatever we are doing at national level can also be advanced at the regional level. And so I think the question here is the role of the regional corporations. How do we, define that from a national level, a country level? And so this is something that a lot of us are now getting into, and a lot of us are now influencing a lot of the research and policy that is coming from a country level in terms of linking us to the regional level and ensuring that even the regional cooperation and platforms can speak for national engagement and what we want to do. Again, second one is targeted partnerships. Of course, we are in an era where we are sort of opening ourselves up, the global South-to-South cooperation. This has been something that has been very, very advanced in terms of showcasing how, for example, Africa, Latin America, Asia, and others can come together in terms of advancing partnerships and ensuring that we are not just relying on the traditional partnerships that have existed for many years, but of course there's a lot of potential in terms of advancing the Pact for the Future from a global South-to-South cooperation. And so how do we invest in that? How do we learn from what is happening, what has happened well in Asia, what can Africa replicate, and so forth. Again, also the issue of the multi-stakeholder platforms. I come from the SDG Kenya Forum, and of course, we believe that there's been some good steps in terms of implementation of SDGs from a multi-stakeholder approach, where the national government with private sector, civil society, academia, and media have come together for the last 10 years and have advanced SDG implementation from a country level. The process is not perfect, but there's a lot of good lessons to learn from the voluntary national reviews, from the hosting of the civil society conference, from implementation processes at country level, and also from just engagement of leaving no one behind, the special groups, the elderly persons, gender equality advancement, and ensuring that we are not just speaking from an elitist perspective, but also we are showcasing what is it that communities want and how can we engage these communities. And so how do we capitalize on these multi-stakeholder platforms that are already existing to advance the Pact of the Future? Speaking about the challenges, of course, coming from Africa, we've, of course, many times have the resource constraints and fragmentation. Of course, there's a lot that can be done when I looked at the monitoring survey. And I know this is across board. How do we come up with innovative methods and methodologies of ensuring that we don't lose out on ongoing stories, real realities that have been lived within communities? There's a lot that is going on, but many times we're not able to document that. Sometimes we're not able to advance that kind of partnerships. And so it's very unfortunate that sometimes there's a lot that exists, but again, it's not brought to the forefront. VNRs, of course, do that. Some of us have tried to ensure that the voluntary national reviews can speak for all communities. But again, it's a happy task for you to get everybody to participate because of issues of resource constraints. Again, we all know about the dwindling resource allocations that are happening within civil society cortex, especially. And this, of course, like in Kenya, I've seen so many organizations close down. And yet these are people who have really done amazing work over the years. Communities rely on them. But unfortunately, most of them now have to shut their offices. They have to rethink of their strategies. They have to come up with ways of how do they engage in this development agenda. So then what are we talking about? Are we talking about, the next 5 years, acceleration of progress? Or are we talking about, going back in terms of the progress? Of course, the issues of political interference and polarization, a lot of us come from countries like in Kenya. I know you've heard about the Gen Z movement. There's always a lot of uphill engagement between the national government and our young people who are the majority in this country, yet they don't feel involved in the development processes. And many times we feel that a lot more can be done by our governments, but many times it's not the case. They don't choose to do the right things. So then how do we give hope to a new generation? How do we talk about the Pact of the Future? Yet the new generations, most of them feel left out. Most of them feel they have no hope. Most of them feel well educated, have the opportunity to advance who they are, but don't have the opportunities. How do we showcase global solidarity in that? Then lastly, on issues of data, and I like the conversation on issues of, for example, gender data. We are a champion of citizen-generated data in Kenya. We have an MOU with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. And for us is to advance civil society production of citizen-generated data. And so it's in very early stages. This is the first year of doing that. And of course, one of the challenges that we didn't expect is when we have the opportunity from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, then a lot of us as civil society organizations are not prepared. We're not statisticians, many of us, and sometimes we don't have the infrastructure to do that. But then how do we start showcasing to civil society organizations your small stories, how you collect data, you can package it, you can follow the standards and methodologies for you to have that as official statistics. So of course, I guess this is all positive in terms of advancing evidence-based perspectives within the SDG processes. So I'll stop there and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Florence. So next I'll give the floor over to Sia Rahman, who is the Executive Director of the Asia Development Alliance. Over to you, Sia.
Thank you very much indeed for giving me this time. I will be talking about the CSOs and the UN bodies in Asia collaborating back to the future as well as the SDG frameworks. In Asia is home of like 59% of the world's population. So, but we have so many regional processes over there. SCAP is leading the SDG gateway process in Asia, and we see that SCAP is also doing a kind of alignment of both SDGs as well as the Pact of the future. We have other regional processes like ASEAN and SAARC, but we see that they are like different political level processes, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So they usually do not indulge into these kind of interventions, but mostly the Asia Pacific SDG partnerships conduct a lot of joint efforts through SCAP, UNDP, and Asia Development Bank. I can share with you a couple of good examples today, how some of the interventions of the regional cooperation actually made some focused interventions. Like, for example, the SCAP SDG Gateway that provides data and policy coherence opportunities, and that also contributes towards the transparency and evidence-based actions and aligns it with the Pact commitments. Similarly, we see that we have this APRSEM, Asia Pacific Regional CSO engagement mechanism that allows a lot of participation of the civil society organizations and also provides a forum for doing the accountability. And in fact, I think we have been actually discussing civic spaces and multi-stakeholderism, so that actually provides that space. Then we see that at the citizens level, we have people's voluntary local review processes as well as the VNRs that allows the rights-based agenda through the VLRs. We have seen that the citizens' voices were also given spaces in the region that actually connects itself with the social contract and the inclusion agenda of the Pact of the future. We see these processes in many of the countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, and Philippines. Yesterday in the same hall, we were discussing about this constituency level monitoring in Malaysia. We have visited one example of SDG villages, 70,000 SDG villages in Indonesia, National Action Plan in Philippines, the citizens SDG dashboards in Pakistan. So we do have many examples actually that connects with the Pact agendas in the region. ASEAN talks about the climate. ASEAN Climate Center is an opportunity where we have lots of conversations around the climate governance. And then we have a South-South learning processes, peer learning processes that focuses on cooperation and capacity strengthening in the region. We also have a couple of examples of youth SDG coalitions in the region, particularly in Pakistan, India. These coalitions specifically focus on education, climate actions. At the civil society level and the regional forums, ADA belongs to ADA Asia Development Alliance. We do a lot of work on People's Scorecard, Voluntary Local Reviews, SDG 16 forums, and we engage with several civil society organizations. GCAP Asia focuses on social protection and climate justice campaigns in the region. Very recently, GCAP Asia has launched this economic justice mobilization that also aligns with Pact commitments. Then Asia Pacific Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism engages marginalized groups in the APFSD and the HLPF processes. APWLD focuses on feminist foreign policy and women economic empowerment advocacy kind of work. NGO Forum on ADB that helps monitoring monitoring the financing impacts in the sustainable development and climate related financing. But still there are so many challenges. We do have these processes, but the challenges are quite distinguished. Like the Pact actually arrived very late, more than half of the SDG time has gone. So it's like really difficult to align Pact commitments with the SDGs. So there is a disconnection between the global vision and the national planning that we have actually seen in not only in the gateways, SCAP gateways, but also in the national frameworks. Most of the national governments have already prepared their priority strategies, so they are not aligned with the Pact. This is one challenge, lack of coherence between UN regional bodies and domestic ministries. So this is also because the national level, as I said, that they are lagging far behind, and the UN is moving so fast actually. You know, every now and then there is new agenda. So it's really difficult for the domestic governments to follow that. Limited political will and civic space, as we have been witnessing that the civil society organizations not only facing challenges because of the new regulatory frameworks at the national level, but also because of the shrinking financial spaces, ODA cuts, and the other things.
Sorry, Sia, to interrupt you. Maybe wrap up.
I'm just wrapping it up, yeah. So then at the subnational and the local level, we see that there's a fragmented implementation, inadequate financing I have already talked about, weak monitoring and data system. It's quite unfortunate that we are still struggling with the data, limited localization funding, and so on and so forth. I would recommend that there could be three things that we do is that we should support CSO-led voluntary local review processes and localization. We need to expand on intergenerational youth-centered governance. We should institutionalize civil society roles in UN regional platforms, global and regional platforms. We should invest in inclusive data systems and feminist budgeting. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sia. And I know there's so much information to share, so it's really hard to pack all of that in such a short presentation. Next, I'll give the floor over to Marianne Beisheim, who is the Senior Associate at Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik, SWP, Germany. So over to you, Marianne, online.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you for having me, even though unexpectedly I can only attend online today. Well, I have to say it feels as if the Summit of the Future has happened a long time ago, even though it was only last September. And as a political scientist, I believe it's my duty to emphasize today that politics matter. So I'll focus a bit more on the obstacles. But it's crucial that we do not lose sight of the political realities. And I would like to quote Richard Gowan, who said, and I quote, "Everyone seems to be resigned to the fact that we are going to have a smaller UN in a few years' time. And that is partially because virtually every member state has other priorities." So against this backdrop, what do I see happening in my region, Europe, who's taking responsibility for the commitments set out in the 2030 agenda and the Pact for the Future? And for this, I'll briefly explore the activities in the UNECE Regional Forum, the European Union and its member states, and informal formats. And of course, as this is 5 minutes, it will not be comprehensive or in-depth, but just a quick snapshot. The UNECE Regional Forum. The progress report has a very speaking title, I find. It says, Sustainable Development in the UNECE Region in 2025, More Data, Persistent Challenges. During the forum, there was lots of talk about solutions and partnerships, but I felt that the debates also revealed really deep divisions within the membership along similar lines to those that also hindered the negotiations on the Pact last year. And the official report does not even mention the Pact for the Future, but the chair summary does, also emphasizing the role of civil society and other stakeholders in implementing the Pact and the SDGs. So I have the feeling that while the Regional Commission has the Pact on its radar, the member states cannot really agree on how to deal with it. As for the EU, I think it's clear that the EU mission in New York is a very strong supporter, and I quote from the recent PGA informal meeting on effective Pact implementation, robust monitoring, and transparent evaluation, and also multi-stakeholder approaches to Pact implementation and review. But how about Brussels? In Brussels, the Global Gateway Initiative, aligned with the Green Deal, is designed as the EU's main strategic tool for promoting sustainable development and green transitions globally, while also strengthening the EU's own competitiveness and supply chain security. It aims to achieve these goals by fostering collaboration, emphasizing, for example, sustainable investments in renewable energy, clean hydrogen production, and other green tech. But one, there are inherent tensions between the initiative's development initiatives and the EU's strategic autonomy. Two, growing pressures within the UN and also from partner countries. And three, given political circumstances, the EU is currently amending parts of the initiatives. For example, corporate sustainability reporting and due diligence requirements in the name of simplification, reduction of red tape, enhanced competitive for and I quote, a bolder, simpler, and faster union. And that sounds a bit like UN80, right? So why is that? That brings me to individual member states. In many EU countries, we have right-wing populist parties that are either already part of the government or a strong opposition party in parliament with movements supporting them. As a result, these governments tend to reduce budgets for multilateral and development cooperation and are also very reluctant to use progressive or green language like transformation, sustainability, or international solidarity. Even in UN80 meetings in Europe, I heard hardly any substantial reference to the Pact, even if countries claimed that this is not about managing decline, but about more effective multilateralism. Still, of course, I think there is also positive developments. There are many activities, for example, in the digital arena, or SDG implementation by cities and local governments. That's also big in Europe, and many others I cannot cover here. And I also see high levels of leadership among many civil servants and members of civil society. And many of them are, in fact, attending the HLPF this week. And in that context, and maybe that's a trend, the same people tend to attend informal formats that are more progressive. Like, for example, the Hamburg Sustainability Conference, a 2-day informal meeting in Hamburg, Germany, that sees itself as an international platform uniting policymakers, business leaders, academics, and civil society to accelerate progress on the SDGs through collective actions. So the title in 2025 was New Alliances Start Here, and in 2026 it will be Together We Co-Create Sustainable Development. And there have been tangible outcomes like the Hamburg Declaration on the decarbonization of global shipping and also on green aviation. This year, the Hamburg Declaration on Responsible AI and a joint declaration on intent by a coalition for an impactful United Nations development system to achieve the SDGs. And you can see that all this is closely related to the Pact's commitment. And I believe it is these coalitions that are highly relevant in the current climate. And lastly, we need to consider how to link these plurilateral coalitions back to the UN's multilateral processes, especially the review of the Pact in 2028. And your monitoring activities will be extremely helpful in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marianne, and thank you so much for joining us. Even though we have you online nonetheless, we're glad that you're able to share the perspective from Europe. So we'll now move back in person. I'm turning the floor over to Rosario Diaz-Garavito, who's the Chief Executive Director of the Millennials Movement. So Rosario, Rosa is going to share from her own perspective and then share the rest of the time with her colleague who will speak in Spanish and she will translate. So over to you, Rosa.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you to C4UN and all the partners that made this space possible. So I'm gonna try to be brief in order to share a little bit about our perception about how we can push the path for the future, ensuring that we keep with the implementation. So a little bit going down to the questions that we consider for this segment of the session. I think some of the good examples that I can mention that are putting together these two processes, such as the 2030 Agenda and the Pact for the Future in the region. For instance, we have the LAC Impact Coalition that was created in Nairobi after Nairobi last year. And after that process, we have been engaging on different spaces. For instance, at the regional forum, we collaborate with UN80, and then we have some conversations, town halls. We have an opportunity to have or open a town hall with Mr. Guy Ryder, who was on the region. But also, you know, we kept working on a dissemination of what is the Pact for the Future and try to link the processes. So I think that is I guess that's a good practice because it's in a space that is intergenerational. We have even children-led organizations. At the same time, we have government-led organizations and even UN national systems within the coalition, such as the UN system of Honduras. So I think that is a good practice. Another one that I can consider, for instance, is, and I resonate with what our colleague was mentioning about the regional mechanisms, because we need to build a bridge in between what is happening at the regional level of the preparatory conversations towards the high-level political forum with these other spaces that are focusing on the Pact for the Future. You know, we need to kind of build a bridge and collaborate among these two spaces. And finally, for instance, I also see other spaces such as the at the regional level after the Summit of the Future. In our legislation powers or legislators like parliaments, there are commissions for the future. This is like a commission of parliamentarians that make law on future. So after this process, and this has been pushed by them, they have created a forum or parliamentary commissions of the future. And I think that is an interesting scope because that is a very good way to make the Pact for the Future tangible with the laws and so on. Something that I consider that are kind of like the challenges is definitely the current context, because even for spaces such as the Black Impact Coalition, we have faced some challenges because some of the organizations that were part of the coalition, they got their funding cut. And even their offices were closed in the region. So we lost those members of the coalition. So I guess that is a situation that limits the capacities of civil society, and also the UN systems now has their budgets are reduced
So the resource mobilization that could help us to set up this conversation is reduced as well. Another thing that I consider that is a challenge, at least for the Latin American and the Caribbean region, is somehow the lack of regional unity. We don't have like a body such as the European Union or the African Union that help us sometimes to move forward. We have different spaces such as the American States Organization that includes Canada and the US. And then we have, for instance, the Mercosur that is focusing more on trade, but it's like a wave, it comes and goes. So we have the ECLAC space, but then we are very polarized. And I'm afraid that that could be a challenge whenever we think, for instance, on the chapter 3 regarding technology and building regional frameworks in order to address the use of artificial intelligence and the new technologies within the region and how we can protect the data and other very critical information. But I guess within these challenges also, I guess they are definitely an opportunity. Challenges are a window of opportunity. And I think that spaces led by civil society or even the ones led by member states or government officials such as these commissions are pivotal to keep the momentum. One of the things that I also kind of resonate with, I guess it was Marianne, was the fact that we need localization of these processes. The 2030 agenda had a huge challenge localizing it. We still have people at a local level that do not know about the 2030 agenda. We still have mayors that just got in their positions that do not know the 2030 agenda. And even we have like government officials that do not know. And in the general public, we still have those challenges. So I wonder, I guess there needs to be a huge approach on localizing the Pact for the Future now. And I guess that process needs to start urgently now because we are 5 years away from the ending of the 2030 agenda, but we are even closer to the beginning of the negotiations. And if we want to ensure that the Pact for the Future includes all our regional perspectives and interests on the follow-up of the Beyond 2030 agenda and introduce the approaches of the Pact for the Future to ensure the implementation and ensure at least a robust framework for development on the future, definitely these conversations, this localization, this resource mobilization need to be prioritized right now, and we need to work with the local actors. Well, just to finish, I just want to mention here that the ways that I've seen that this has the high-level political forum and these previous conferences we have had in the last months have helped the Pact for the Future. I really like, for instance, the conversation on SDG 17, because I think now member states are kind of fostering, and yesterday I was on a meeting with some missions, and they already were working on how do we engage, how do we collaborate to start thinking on the 2030 agenda, the 2030 Beyond agenda. I guess that's correct. And then I think that collaboration was interesting, and they also kind of asking us, civil society, how can we collaborate with the Global South? How can we ensure that the Global South member states have a say? And I guess that this space of the high-level political forum was a good enabler space, but we need more members and more ambition on this. And finally, you could. Yes, and finally, the SDG 8, because of the Sevilla commitment, many of the mentions was about the Pact for the Future, and I think many of the member states commit for resource mobilization within that framework. So now I'm just gonna share it with Antonio super fast. We are gonna 1 minute. Yes, we are gonna present an initiative that we are running from the LAC Coalition, and this is also to strengthen these synergies between the 2030 agenda, work at the local level, at the regional level, and push the Pact for the Future.
Bueno, desde la coalición y desde toda la diversidad que contemplamos, hemos identificado que el Pacto para el Futuro debe ser para y con las personas, es decir, que las personas deben de tener las suficientes herramientas como para poder aplicar el Pacto para el Futuro en todos los espacios con el objeto de lograr esa agenda común que tenemos, ¿no? Por ello se ha propuesto o se está creando un proceso de fortalecimiento de capacidades para decodificar el Pacto para el Futuro en América Latina y el Caribe, que va a tener una duración de 6 sesiones, comenzando el 7 de agosto, y vamos a buscar que la mayor diversidad de actores sociales en la región puedan adquirir las capacidades y herramientas de aplicar el Pacto para el Futuro para que nadie sea dejado atrás. Gracias.
Thank you. I'm gonna translate. My colleague here, he's Antonio Palma. He is part of the RIADI. This is the regional network for the people with disabilities and their families, and they are also part of the coalition. And when we mean intergenerational and intersectional, this is what we mean. You know, my colleague Antonio was mentioning that in order to from the diversities of the coalition and understanding that the Pact for the Future need to be built within the people, it's important to build tools so people and different stakeholders can apply and implement the Pact for the Future in different spaces. This is why we have been working on a capacity building process in order that is focused on strengthening the capacities of these different stakeholders. Is a series of trainings called the decoding the Pact for the Future in Latin America and the Caribbean is a proposal of 6 sessions that is going to begin on August the 6th. And what we look is to not only foster the capacities, but also consider diversity on the process by providing these tools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rosie, thank you both for providing this information, particularly this idea of like decoding the Pact for the Future of the sessions go well. So we'll have our last speaker for this session before we go to our closing. Next, I'd like to introduce Joshua Cooper, who's the director of the Hawaii Institute for Human Rights. Over to you, Joshua. Thank you.
Aloha, Joshua Cooper Kohinoa, no Hawaii mai au. I'm Joshua Cooper. It's an honor to be here. And I'll share a little bit in the Pacific where we're really weaving all the international instruments and then doing our best to navigate the UN to pull everything together to make it important, of course, at home in our islands. So we look at it really from islands and indigenous perspectives. And what we've been focusing on is really changing the UN to work for us. The Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues existed, and we made sure it had a Pacific region. We're always under Asia Pacific, and it's always Asia Pacific. And so we were making sure that in this case that we were included, but we get along great. The other aspect, of course, that's so important for us is Futures has always been part of Indigenous perspective. The Kumulipo, of course, goes from beginning of time of darkness to 7 generations into the future infinitely. So that's something that we've always cared about and have been involved. What we've done and really focused on is really bringing it all together. So voluntary local reviews, LDCs around the Paris Agreement, of course, 1.5 is crucial for us to stay alive. It's an existential threat, and the universal periodic review. So we use a human rights-based approach to all 3 of those. And we just have our 3rd voluntary local review. It was working together, Hawaii Green Growth, great group. We also have our own dashboard. Aloha Plus Challenge also existed prior to the SDGs. And so what we tried to show is to make sure everything comes together. For our VLR, it's youth-led. We organize something called the Youth Summit for Sustainable Development. We don't do a lot on Fridays, so we don't do the Greta Fridays for the Future. Ours was Walk for Wednesday for the World, but we had over 150 youth that participated and created the entire VLR. As far as LDC and that aspect, we pull it all together, even with the Beyond Borders National Jurisdiction, deep seabed mining. All those issues are crucial because we see ourselves as part of nature and weaving all that together. And the last part with the UPR is the US will be reviewed on November 10th. So we bring all that together. And of course, if the US doesn't show up, that's why we in Hawaii participate and reach out in our region to coordinate that way. 2 things I'll share real quick is with the Pacific Island Forum. We organized there. So September 8th through 9th, we'll be having a Pact for the Future for the follow-up and sharing that in the region at the Solomon Islands. And then also at UNGA, we always do a UN SDGs and global human rights. And we'll be having our 10th annual between September 25th and 26th. And even just tomorrow, just to share briefly and just still be within our time, is we created a local lab with a best practices bank. So in the Pacific and in the US, we ask everyone to pick one of the goals or more, but say what you're doing that can actually be seen and shared and then scaled up. And then we're collecting that. And then the other side of tomorrow, of course, is so important is it's a local lab, but what people are doing is peer reviewing each other. So we partner with Suva Fiji and working with them, and then they'll be doing Bula, we'll be doing Aloha, but we'll be sharing how that sustainable development goals are being implemented in our island. So that puts us to where we are. Back on that.
Thank you so much, Joshua. So I'll ask for your patience so that we can have the remarks from our closing speaker. Just to maybe to say thank you for the previous speakers for the emphasis on partnerships and I think all the information that was shared, the experiences that were shared, really shows us the importance of being able to monitor progress, to measure progress, and have this kind of cross-regional cross-pollination, which is really interesting, but also helpful to share best practices and information. So next, I'll present our last speaker to close us off, Mr. Themba Kalua, who's the Director for the Pact for the Future Implementation in the EOSG. Mr. Kalua has been taking on an important role at the UN in the official guiding system-wide implementation of the Pact. Mr. Kalua will offer reflections on how today's discussion can inform implementation, strengthen the role of stakeholders, and align efforts across the UN system. So over to you, Mr. Kalua.
Thank you very much, Lily. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon, partners. It's perhaps a lesson that next time maybe we need half a day of this discussion because I can sense that there is a lot of richness in what has been shared, and I know that there are a lot of people who are, urging to say something about what's been discussed, but it's a challenge to all of us on how do we continue this discussion beyond this room. I want to thank the Coalition for the UN We Need and the Baha'i International Community for convening this important and timely conversation. And both the Baha'i International Community and the C4UN have been steady partners on Pact implementation, and we appreciate their continued engagement. But I also want to thank Jamaica through Ms. Aika Waters for the role that they play in continuing to advocate for Pact implementation. You heard from her remarks that Jamaica was one of the co-facilitators for the annex to the Pact for the Future, the annex on declaration on future generations. So many thanks to Jamaica. As we mark the 80th anniversary of the UN, we find ourselves at a very pivotal juncture. Not only in the race to 2030, as you heard, we have less than 5 years to 2030, but also in renewing the promise and relevance of multilateralism itself with the UN at its center. So the Pact for the Future and its annexes are a promise or a call to our collective promise to fulfill existing commitments, especially on the SDGs, while equipping us to navigate and respond to emerging and fast evolving challenges like AI, digital governance, and intergenerational equity. The main sort of purpose or aim of the Pact for the Future is to turbocharge SDG implementation. And I know one of the interventions was saying, we need to be mindful that we're not introducing so many agendas at the same time. So it's important in the way we frame implementation so that it doesn't sound like we're introducing new and competing agendas. The Pact for the Future and SDGs are part of the same efforts, with the Pact aiming at turbocharging SDG implementation. Let me reflect a little bit on the two elements of the theme for the discussion. One is on tracking progress. And I want to repeat in a different way the proverb that Dan shared which says what gets measured, gets managed, or gets done. The President of the General Assembly has been convening a series of dialogues that I know some of you made reference to those dialogues in the conversation. The dialogue that he convened last week was focusing on the 2028 review of the Pact. Before that, he had convened another dialogue on monitoring and evaluation on the Pact. I want to share with you 3 key takeaways from what member states are saying. Number one, Pact monitoring should align with existing mechanisms, particularly those that relate to reporting on SDGs. That includes VNRs, voluntary national reviews, that many of you referred to and are part of in the different countries that you come from, as well as the high-level political forum. Second, the Pact monitoring must be inclusive, and this is where you come in. Multi-stakeholder engagement, especially civil society participation, is essential. And the third, member states are saying we must act now to put in place mechanisms, systems for meaningful participation and meaningful forward-looking review of the Pact in 2028. So today's discussion reinforces these 3 key takeaways. The tools that have been presented today, the Pact monitoring survey and the implementation dashboard, are important contributions. They are more than tracking mechanisms. They are enablers of action and accountability. And at the UN, we already have begun monitoring 44% of the 383 Pact actions, where the UN is leading or where the UN is supporting. And as we move forward, we will seek opportunities for complementarities and synergies with what we have heard this afternoon. On mobilizing regional strategies, which is the second element of the theme, if the Pact is to truly deliver transformative change, implementation must happen where it matters most, which is in communities, in countries, and across every region. I am happy to note in the different perspectives that have been shared, I want maybe to make reference to them. Rosalia, you have talked about the gap that sometimes exists between the regional and the national. But that gap also exists between what happens at New York level and what happens at the country. I've spent most of my time in the field. I only arrived in New York in February to take up this role. And I have been shocked about the level of engagement on Pact that is happening at New York level. That's not the sense that I got when I was in the field. And we need to bridge that gap. And you play an important role as partners in bridging that gap. The role of regional strategies is extremely important. We've heard about the strategies in Africa, for instance, the AU 2063. We've heard about the global gateway from Marianne, the EU's global gateway. Whatever efforts that we put in place, we must try our best to ensure that we align with the different regional strategies that are there. We are leveraging the convening role of the regional economic commissions. Zia talked about ESCAP, for instance, and we are working with ESCAP. You also talked about the regional collaborative platform. And many of you, I know, participate in the annual forums on sustainable development that regional economic commissions convene. We are using those platforms, and I've met some of you in this year's regional forum, to try to bring stakeholders together, not just civil society, but others, to advance Pact implementation. And I invite you to reach out to us for next year's regional forums to explore how we can work together to organize events that specifically target advancing of Pact implementation. But at country level, we are also engaging our resident coordinators and UN country teams to work with you and to work with the governments to make sure that the Pact implementation is happening at the country level, aligned to national priorities, but also bringing together multi-stakeholders, including civil society. Let me share briefly as I conclude, before Lily gives me a sign that my time is up, just to share maybe 3 brief things that you might be interested in. Number one is that we have been reaching out to member states and briefing them on Pact implementation, again, thanks to the PGA who has taken a leadership role on this. But as we do that, we want to have a deliberate outreach to civil society organizations. So in a couple of weeks' time, we will be organizing a briefing on Pact implementation specifically for civil society organizations, and we will reach out to you through your networks to invite you for this briefing. Because again, as part of bridging that gap, sometimes you just need to provide information to civil society organizations, and that briefing will be precisely aimed at that. Secondly, we are organizing or developing a website on Pact implementation. And we want that website to be owned by all of us. So there will be a section on that website that will capture civil society's contribution to Pact implementation. And I hope when that website is launched, we can partner with you to get as many stories as possible. Because in this current environment, when you open the news, all you hear are gloomy stories. We need inspiring stories, stories that give hope. And we rely on you, since you're on the ground, to share some of the stories that you've been sharing to bring hope and inspiration to others. Let me turn to you just to briefly highlight that as civil society, we consider you to be essential to Pact implementation. You have proven that you are essential to SDG implementation, and we're counting on the same efforts and partnership as we implement the Pact. You bring energy, you bring ideas, accountability, and reach. You help ensure that promises made are promises kept. You can raise the visibility of the Pact by using your different platforms and voices. You can bring new data, research, lived experiences to bear in the global processes. You can forge coalitions, and I know many of you are part of different coalitions that push for more inclusive and equitable rules-based global system. I want perhaps also to challenge you as civil society, because the fragmentation that you sometimes see within government, within the UN system, we also see the same fragmentation across the civil society organizations. Now, these initiatives that you have shared now, if we were to do another convening like this in another region, we will hear similar type of initiatives that are underway or are being implemented. I think it's important for civil society organizations to also coordinate better so that we are not duplicating efforts, especially in this current environment of limited resources. Number two, you need to think more carefully about reach. There are only very few of you who can have the privilege of coming to New York for higher forum. The engagements that you have had here, how do you multiply them when you go back? Within your communities, but also across regions. Our colleague here was talking about UN Women. I worked in UN Women before as a representative for one of the country offices. And one of my observations initially when I arrived in that particular country was that there was a lot of civil society engagement doing great stuff. But when we convened, civil society organizations were speaking to themselves. So when I talk about reach, I'm also not talking about only reaching out to other civil society organizations because you're speaking to the converted. But how do you reach out to member states? How do you reach out to private sector? Because we need multi-stakeholder engagement, not just civil society operating in silo, but civil society in collaboration with others to advance Pact implementation. As the world is going through a reset because of the global shifts in what's happening in the world, I think it's also an important opportunity for civil society to rethink their ways of working. Because the impacts and the changes that we're going through as a UN system, I'm sure you're also experiencing some of the same challenges that the UN system is experiencing. Now, how do you use this as an opportunity? Do not waste any crisis, as they say. So as the UN is undertaking a UN80 initiative, looking at how we strengthen ourselves to be able to deliver better to the peoples of the world, how can civil society also use the same opportunity to rethink ways of working in line with the shifts that we have seen globally? The Secretary General has consistently underscored the value he places on the partnership with civil society, and you can count on us as a UN system to walk alongside you every step of the way. And in that spirit, let me end with a very famous, I believe it's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So let us go far together to ensure that the Pact for the Future and the SDGs deliver real and lasting impact for the people everywhere. So again, thank you to Bahai, thank you to C4UN, and thank you for all of you who have presented and all of you for your presence this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Right, everybody. Just a couple words to again say thank you all for coming and for your support. I heard 3 invitations in the speaking remarks. Maybe Mr. Kalua said it in jest, but maybe perhaps we do indeed need half a day to continue this conversation. So maybe that's a challenge, opportunity to those who are here to think about that. I heard an invitation to continue filling out the survey that Future UN has put together. So if you haven't done so, please do that. And an invitation to attend the Global Futures Forum in 2026 as a way to prepare for the review of the Summit of the Future in 2028. So thank you so much, everybody, and I hope that you enjoyed the rest of your participation in each other. Yeah, thank you. If for the panelists who are still here, perhaps we can take a quick picture. If that's okay before you go.